Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to talk about Apache Maven, just for overview and definitions and objective. So Apache Maven is a software project management and comprehension tool based on the concept of a project object model (POM). Maven can manage a project builds, report, and documentations from a central piece of information. Maven, a Yiddish word meaning accumulator of knowledge. Attempt to simplify the build process in the Jakarta Turbine project. Build the projects, a clear definition of what the project consider of, an easy way to publish project information, and the way of shared jars across several projects. Building and managing any Java-based project, day-to-day work of a Java developer is easier. Apache Maven objectives. So, making the build process easy, providing a uniform build system, providing quality project information, providing guidelines for best practice development, allowing transparent migrations to new features. Overall, if we'll talk about and comparing with previous tools like in Ant, we used to do that in comparing with Ant and Maven is a better, especially in Java project. Reason why there is so many plugins and features is there. However, so many legacy system is there which is unstructured and migrating from that uh, that applications to that in especially in microservices that is a really tough. However, still we required some of the expectations to structure it and divide that in a legacy system to that in like kinds of a microservices. So that's all about in object Apache Maven in overview. We'll talk more details in step by step in further session. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to talk about how to install the Maven and the supporting tools like OpenJDK or in a Linux environment. So these are the commands we have to perform that in if you want to install that in operating system like in Linux family. So if you are using as a user data in AWS, then bin bash is required. Cwin bash, yeah. sudo su, I'm just converting my EC2 user to root users. sudo yum update minus y. If you want to update that in your OS, then you perform. This is the optionals because it is time consuming and I have skip it. If you want, then you can do it. That is a better way to take the latest update. If something is there like in vulnerability and OS patching and hardening and all, it will be done by that help of that. sudo yum install wget. We are going to use the wget for downloading the maven zip file. Zip I'm using that in unzip I'm using, yeah. IOM install java 1 java hyphen 1.8.0 openjdk because that is also required. That is not required. Open JDK devel is required and OpenJDK as well. Let it be. After that, CD I'm just moving to that in directory opt and sudo wget URL of that in a zip file. With help of that, it will be downloaded into that in opt directory. Sudo unzip. I'm just unzipping that in this file into that in opt directory. Once that in unzip is done, then it will be rm minus rf. It will be go and remove the zip file that is not required because we have a unzip file. After that, I'm setting that in a m2 home directory. So echo I'm just putting m2 underscore home equals to I want to use that in double inverted comma in this directory, so I'm just using that in slash for carriage return in double inverted comma and then forward slash opt slash apache maven 3.5 and again double inverted comma one for that in this double inverted comma one another one for these ones, and I'm redirecting that line of code into that in root directory dot base underscore profile file. Similarly for path also I'm adding into that in a base profile. After that I'm putting the export path for base profile. I want to make sure that in my one m2 directory and path is set and export. After that I'm doing that in a source, so base profile with help of that these configurations will be loaded into that in OS level and printing that in my one hyphen version. So this is all about, we'll see that in a actual in theoretical. So let's go and do it. So I'm logging into that in AWS, and my name of the user is there in EC2 hyphen users, because I'm only doing in cloud. So first thing first, what I have to do, we'll check that need that in Linux system or not. uname minus uname, that's it. So you'll get that in this is the Linux here. After that I have already copied the same command whatever is there in ppt. So this is the command I'm going to perform it. You can do that in one by one as well, but in bulk I'm just putting that, this command will again use that once we are doing that in automations, yeah, with help of a Jenkins will perform this activity. It will take about 1 or 2 minutes hardly. OpenJDK is going on, yeah, all done. And Maven hyphen version. So this is the last command we perform it. So with help of that, whatever command we perform, and Maven 3.5.4 is installed now, and we can able to do that in whatever you want. Yeah. So this is our target for this lectures, and uh, I'll suggest you to go through that, and do it and follow this command, refer this command, and this ones I'll be uploading to that in external resource sections. With help of that, as it is, you can perform it without any issue. But only thing is that if going forward, if you want to change the versions, come and change that in like in 1.9 something, so and so forth, and Maven versions as well. And these are the you have to change that in scripts. Most probably I'll update this once, latest versions in going forward as well. But if you want to a specific versions, you can go and you can do it, but you have to check that in compatibility, yeah, which versions of Maven is supporting, and Java as well, because Maven will be work only on basis of Java. If Java is not there, Maven will be not work. So that's all, and thanks for watching. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to talk about Apache Maven build lifecycle. So there are three built-in build life cycles: default, clean, and site. So the default life cycle handles your project deployment. The clean life cycle handles project cleaning. The site life cycle handles the creations of your project site documentations. We'll talk about this in more details in upcoming with example in especially in command sections and some of the Java and Spring project. So how we are going to use that in default, clean, and site, and with help of that we'll deploy the project, or will clean the project, or generate the documentations. Talk more about that in a how build lifecycle is made up of a phases. You know, a first stage we have a validate. So validate the project is the correct and all necessary information is available. That means if some tag is required to, like mandatory tag, we have to of course provide it. If we are using some proper opening tag, then we have to close it, and so on and so forth. So we'll talk about more into once we define that in a form. Yeah. Compile. So compile the source code of the project. So let's say just building that and developing one Java code. Yeah. So with help of a compile, we'll be able to compile the Java code. Yeah. Or dot, you know uh, with help of that we'll convert from that in a source file to that in a compile file. The test compile source code using the suitable unit testing framework. These tests should not require the code to be packed or deployed. So without doing that in making the jar or a war file or deploying to that in any server, the ability is there that your test code will be like in tested. However, you have to write that in test case like in JUnit and so forth, or mocking package. So take the compile code and package it into the distributable format such as a jar. Yeah, so package is nothing but it will be create a jar file, war file, er file, or any other file which will we can first it will be go validate, compile, test, and then after it will be bundle it out in form of a jar. Verify, run and checks on the results of an integration test to ensure quality criteria are met. Install, install the package into the local repository. If you use a dependency in the other project locally, deploy, done in the build environment, copy the final package to the remote repository for the sharing with the other deployers and projects. So these are the build life cycle made up of phases. So different phases there. We'll talk about that. Let's say once I'll do the package. So if I'll perform that in Maven package, by default validate, compile, test, and will be performed. So first step is the validations, compile, test, then package will be performed. If I just do that in Maven install, so what will be happen? Validate, compile, test, package, verify, and then install will be performed. So these are the list of all activity will be happen. If I'll perform deploy, all activity will be happen from validate, compile, test, package, verify, install, and then deploy. Yeah. So after that we have a build phase is made up of plugins goal. So the build all depend on the in plugins. So if I'll perform the Maven clean, yeah, so I'm putting the dependency, copy dependency, and then do the package. Yeah, so first step we are doing that in a Maven, that is a Maven command clean. So it will be go and clean up that in all files whatever's created into the target folder, and we'll see in example, then it will be better understandable in upcoming lecture. So Maven clean, first it will be go and remove the target folder. Dependency, copy dependency, it will be copy the dependency, but it will be refer from the plugins. So plugin is mandatory for in that case, and then it will be do the package. So while doing the package again, it will be do the validate, test, and so forth until unless package. So we'll talk about once we are going to go through that in a form, in how we are going to define the plugins goal. Yeah, like in dependency, copy dependency, and so forth. The the last phase of we have to remember that in especially some phases are not usually called from that in command line. So the phases name with the hyphen words like in pre hyphen start, post hyphen start, or process hyphen start are not usually directly called from that in command line. So how you are going to call? Let's say if you are performing any task like a pre-integrations task, yeah. So this will be not called directly. Phase to be prepared that integrations test contained environment. So if you are using that in any tools like in third party tools, like in Kovisura via Docker, so in that case if you run that in a Docker container, yeah, after that what will be happen, it will be go, everything is successful, it will be go and post activity and clean that all unnecessary files and folders whatever is generated for that, especially in test. Yeah. So for more details, there is just so many things you have to go through that. In high level, just remember this kinds of a for build, and every phase will have like by default there is a theory built-in life cycle is there, default, clean, and site. And by Maven validate also you can call it, but it will be nothing. Maven compile, test, package, verify, install, and deploy. But if you call the deploy, by default all previous one will be called. That is, you have to remember it. Yeah. And Maven build also depend on that in plugins, and that plugins we have to define it until unless it will not work. So, and some of that in restrictions we have to remember, which is we cannot call that like in a pre hyphen start, post hyphen start, or like in process hyphen start. For example, pre hyphen integrations test we cannot call from that in a Maven command, yeah, or like in a with any other tools as well, while calling the Mavens. So we need to call that in actual, but this it will be pre in built into that in command, like in pre or like in post or process. Yeah, so you can refer that in more details from that in Maven site, like in lifecycle underscore reference. I'm not going to go through that in a more depth into lifecycle management, but just remember that in high level, whatever I'm highlighting, that is just sufficient for the development point of view. That's all about, and thanks for watching. Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to talk about different Maven command. Yeah. So like validate, compile, test, package, verify, install, and deploy. Anyhow, deploy we will not able to do because whatever project we have created, we don't have here, plugins. So let's go and do that. First command will perform the maven validate. So in previous project we created that in project called uh, mbnclen. First let me clean it. So with help of a clean command, it will be go and delete that in all file except your source file, especially target. So if you'll see that in this one, the target folder was there, but while doing that in my one clean, now the target folder is removed. Only we have a source file. So clean will be clean that in target file here. So we go through that in a clean first. Yeah. So clean is entirely different. So this is the build, yeah, build life cycle. So we have a clean, if you remember, clean site and default. So the build will be there like in where this is the part of a build. So we are going to do that in a validate now. mvnvalidate enter. Yeah, so it's validated successfully. It's saying that in building tutorial by example app 0.0 snapshot, nothing more than that. But there is no change into that. That reminding we have a source file only. Just validate will we check the form file and it will print it as it is. After that we have a compile. So yeah, compile will be compile the source file. Yeah, and now we have a target. So in the compile if we perform that, only it's converting the source file and test file into that in a class like in app.class and test. If you'll see that in we have earlier like in app.java app test.java. Now app.class is there. Yeah, so it's just converting that into that in a app to that in a class file. Yeah, so after that we have a test mbntst. So before that I'm just I want to use that in clean. So it will be remove tst and then it will be a start doing the test. So test also it will be create, there is nothing and test executed. So if I'll perform the tree, now target folders, all test file is created, but there is no jar file, so far so forth. So the packaging is not required. If you see that in a compile, we got that in so far that much. Once we are running that in test, we got that in additional surfing reports. Yeah, but there is no bundle on that. This command you perform. Yeah. Now after that I want to perform the package because it's a test then package. Yeah. So now jar file will be also created. So sir, this was there in earlier, and this jar file created now with help of a package. Yeah. What we have, verify. Yeah. So it's a verifying and everything is successful, and there is no change in especially in source. After that we have install. So it will be installed locally in empty directory. So the on install command, if you'll see that in why you used to do that, if required this dependency, so in root directory empty2 repository come tutorial by example, and this jar file will be placed over there. So if you want to run that in another program which is dependent on this jar file, so it will be identifying, and there is no other than that is required. So in install only that is a different, it will be copy that in your jar file into that in common repository locations where your other pom file will be like in a considered as a dependency and utilize it. Yeah. After that we have deploy. So deploy anyhow it will not work because in our pom file we don't have any goals for deploy where we want to deploy. Let's say if I'll perform the deploy, we need a tomcat server, any web server, or like in repository like in access and so and so forth, or any URL where you want to like in zip that in your package file. Yeah. So deploy will be not come for just for testing purpose. I'll perform that in the deploy, but it will be failure. It will be asked that in the URL and plugins configure. Yeah. So if you'll see that in default deploy on the project, it will be a deployment failed repository element was not specified in the POM inside distributions management element, or hyphen that additional parameter like layout and URL. So um, deploy will be not work until unless we'll define it in next time. We'll define it in once we'll create that in other project in deploy as well, once we learn in that in a nexus, and in that time our Jenkins will be pull that and make it and all, and it will be deployed that into that in a nexus. So there is no need to go and type that in all those command from like validate, compile, test, package, verify, install and deploy. If you perform the deploy, all before will be considered by default. If you type that in install, or like in execute the install, then till verify along with install will be performed. Let's go and see it. So now I'm going to remove that in all. Clean is a entirely different, so let it be clean and then deploy. So clean will be removed the first. Yeah, and after that it's going to perform a deploy same so now I'm going to do that clean and install. So if I'll perform the clean install, all the steps will be considered, including the validate, test, running that in and all. Yeah, and we are able to see that. So we have to understand the life cycle most probably, and then these are that in top level commands only, and rest of that also we can use that like in archetypes, so many other dependencies. And in upcoming sessions, if I have like in time, I'll add that in all those additional command as well. Anyhow, in we are going to go through that in once we are going to install the in Jenkins. Most of the command will be used that in Jenkins itself, and we'll perform that in all command, Maven command, and it will be like in a with an integrated way it will work it out. So that's all about for this lecture. Thanks for watching, and hello and welcome. In this lecture, we are going to talk about Apache Maven Project Object Model POM. So, Project Object Model or POM is the fundamental unit of work in Maven. It is an XML file that contains information about the project and configurations details used by the Maven to build the project. It contains default values for most projects. Example for this is the build directory, which is the target, the source directory, which is src/main/java, the test source directory, which is src test java, and so on. Yeah. The minimal POM, the minimum requirement for a POM are the following. The project root directory model version should be at least 4.0.0. Group ID, the ID of the project group. Artifact ID, the ID of the artifact project. Version, the version of the artifact under the specified group. If we'll talk about that in format structure, so minimum one project model version 4.0.0 and closing tag of model versions. Group ID, make sure group I is a capital ID, that my company dot app group ID. Artifacts ID, again I is capital my app. Version, name of the version, and closing the project. So minimum that much of um, syntax is required for generating that in generating that in POM file. So in more details you can refer that, like in especially I'm not going to talk about that. Let's see, like in we repository, how we are going to do that in a build. So in build, if we'll talk about that, in target is there the classes, all classes will be generated over here. We'll talk about that in src. So src is over here, and that in scripts will be there. Similarly, we have a resource file, and so on and so forth. If there is a target site will be there, then you'll come into the site. So all details are there in once we'll do that in microservices with a spring. We'll do that in more details. uh, so far so forth, this is just about the basic. I'm not going to in a deep, otherwise it will take a long time. Yeah, so just go through that in this link. That is sufficient. However, we'll create that in all ample amount of, like in the all required fields, like in plugins and all those, in one of that in real time example, because if I'll go through that in now, it will take a long time, and it's hard to explain as well. So in goal we have defined that in jar. Similarly, we can define the var and so on and so forth. Yeah, and we'll see once we're creating that in one web project as a var file. Then in that time we'll go and deploy into that in Tomcat or like into Nexus, and in that time we'll define that in all plugins in more details. So this is all about for basic. And just remember, project model versions, group ID, artifacts ID, and versions, and project is required, and nothing to remember. Once you'll go and generate that in as a template from archetype, you'll be able to get that in default POM file, and just you have to change that in name of that in group ID, artifacts ID, and version. Nothing more than that. We'll see how all this will work in integrating with a Jenkins, yeah, and other tools. So that's all about in quick overview of a form file. Yeah, and thanks for watching. Hello and welcome. In this lecture we are going to talk about how to create a Java project with help of a Maven in Windows 2010. So remaining same command will be there what we have performed that in Unix. Only the things you have to follow that in Maven and Java installations in Windows, and then you have to perform this command what we have already performed it. Let's go and do it. So first thing first, you have to do that in Maven hyphen versions. So I mean, like in Windows Server. Yeah, I'm going to perform mbn hyphen version. Yeah, and all done. But old versions of Maven is there into that in my Windows. So reason why I'm doing that in how we are going to do that. So if you'll see that in Java is there remaining 18091. However, Apache Maven 311 is there. Yeah. So with now what we are saying that in different versions we still the same command will be run like in what we perform that in archetypes and so on and so forth. Yeah, so this is the command we have next, like in Maven archetypes, archetype generate clone generate hyphen d, group id come the tutorial by example hyphen d artifacts id equal to tutorial by example hyphen app minus d archetype artifacts id maven hyphen archetype hyphen quick start. So this command will be pull that in a template and it will be placed into that in local directory. So I'm in there at the moment c clone workspace and performing this command. Yeah, so if you perform the first time it will be download that in several dependency. I have already performed that in before preparing this video. So some of the dependency already downloaded and most probably it will be not asked. So similar kinds of prompts is prompting what it was prompting that in earlier. So just press enter and type capital Y and then enter. So all done. If you'll see that in build successful, and if I'll see that in my directory that now we have a tutorial by example dot app and it's just created. Yeah, so yeah, so the next command we have a cd and tutorial by example. Now I'm in the cd and mbn packg. Yeah, so my ambient package it will package it out, and now if I click on that in a dir we got the pom src and target. So here we don't have anything, we can check it directly, but before that I want to run this command java hyphen cp and target slash okay du du, we need to copy the package name. So what I'll do, I'll go to that in a directory. Yeah, target this file we need to copy it. Yeah, gr com that tutorial by example dot app and enter. Yeah, so now you are able to see that in hello world. Yeah, so if I'll go into this folder, yeah, and I'll go over here, you can able to see that in main, in inside main we have a java com tutorial by example and this file. Yeah, so the app file is there. Yeah, and that similarly we have a test file as well. So this is all about how to perform this command into like in a generating the archetype or template of Maven project. Yeah, and do that in a Windows. So that's all about. Thanks for watching.